Hi there, my name is Kendrick, and today I get to interview Bella. So, Bella, welcome.
Hi.
So, Bella, can you please tell us your full type?
I'm an SIFE ISFJ blast, play, sleep, consume, and I'm audio, so MF. So yeah.
And did you get your social type as well?
Yes, I'm a number two. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries, it's all good. And then what did you think and how did you feel when you got your results back?
At first, I was kind of like, no way I'm leading SI because I've spent years over my original MBTI journey thinking that, or kind of going back and forth between INFJ and INTJ. But I guess I was closer with the INFJ, but I had no clue that I had SI. But once Dave explained it to me, it made really good sense. I was like, oh, okay. Like, I guess that makes more sense. Oh,
Oh, sorry.
oh,
What
you're good.
were your parts then? Let's start with your first animal. This is your first animal is double activated
Yes.
um, SF blast. How did you
Hmm.
personally experience that double activated SF blast of yours?
It's definitely been, what's the word? It's definitely been useful throughout my life. So I've always seen myself as just kind of a person where it's like once I get an idea about something that I want to do, like let's say that it's doing some sort of like college degree or whatever. I am always thinking like, okay, what do I have to do? I have to do this step first and then the next step and then so on and so forth. And so I'm very methodical in my way of thinking. And I tend to just kind of like plow through information and all that kind of stuff as quick as I can to get where I want to be. And that on the opposite end of that, I have the consume last. So I kind of have a hard time retaining some of that information sometimes. And I feel very like almost ADHD.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. If you're a blast play, you probably have ADHD. Like I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Very extroverted energy for sure.
yeah. Okay, cool. So yeah, I'm play blast, so I got diagnosed with ADHD. So I wouldn't be surprised. So uh
Yeah, yeah, that's definitely me in a nutshell.
so you have play second, and
Yes.
your play is double feminine, I believe. It's double
Yes.
feminine NF play. How do you
Yeah.
personally experience a double feminine NF play of yours?
I'm very gentle with the tribe and I like to kind of play with them and or, playing. I kind of like to what's the best way to explain this? I'm always throwing weird jokes and ideas at people and seeing kind of how they bounce it back to me, I guess. So like for example, like I'll go into chats and on Discord or something and I'll be like, hey, who here likes anchovies on pizza, like something that I don't even really like, and they'll all be like, oh, I love anchovies, and then I'm like, ew. I'm like kind of joking around but in kind of like a gentle way, I guess. I'm not trying to put people down, I'm just kind of like throwing like little slaps here and there, I guess. I don't know. But it's always like weird topics like that, like stuff that I wouldn't normally talk about with people in my inner circle. But yeah, it's I definitely use it a lot in a work setting as well, where I'm kind of like I work with kids with autism, but with the parents and with the kids, I'm always throwing like little ideas and little um like just some fun, like cool fun ideas to see what the kids would enjoy, and then kind of seeing if they want to go along with it, I guess. Just always, I'm always relying on other people's opinions, like yes or no, and if it's a yes, I'm all for it. If it's a no, I like, even if I think it's a good idea, I tend to be like, oh, okay, we can find something else. Like I'm not very punchy on the tribe, I guess. Like I'm not trying to move them, I suppose, if that makes sense.
I like how you set a trap to the tribe with like the anchovy question. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's kind of funny. Um,
Yeah. It's
and
always something like that. I'm like,
yeah, and the
you
trap is
know.
like it's like a value trap, you know. It's like, do you value this anchovy?
Mhm.
That you're like, oh, you're disgusting, you know. So it's kind of funny.
Yeah.
You're setting the trap there. Um, So for your SF blast, going back there again, do you kind of guide people if they're like being not socially acceptable with their behavior? Like let's say someone's acting up and stuff, and it's a little bit on the offensive side, and it's like not acceptable. And do you like try to like, hey, maybe you should cut that out? Like, do you do that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so my boyfriend is I want to say like he's kind of like TINI, super double activated sleep, very identity driven. So probably masculine TI first, and he's always kind of like punching the tribe a lot, like just with his identity, he's always very like offensive with his humor and everything like that. And I also have masculine TI, but it kind of doesn't come out as much, I guess. It's usually when I'm annoyed or upset that it's kind of like coming out in a really unhealthy way. But just with people like kind of like that, where they kind of say things that are offensive and they're not really thinking about what everybody else is thinking, I'm always saying like, cut it out, like, so I guess in that particular situation, it's like I'll always warn certain people before going around certain groups. Like if I'm going around my family, which part of my family is very like Christian, very religious, value oriented in that way. And I'm always like, I'm not religious personally, but I respect that they are, and I don't want to make them uncomfortable. So I'm always adjusting my language and the way that I talk and what I talk about around certain groups. And when other people aren't doing that, I'm like trying to warn them to do it because I don't want them to get like reamed by my family. So I'm like, let's just all like get along here. So yeah, I definitely do that on a pretty crazy level.
What if someone were to say like an offensive joke or humor that's like for you it's like definitely offensive, but it lands and everyone thinks it's funny? How do you react to that? It's clearly
See,
offensive.
if it's funny, if everybody agrees with it or everybody thinks that it's funny and they kind of go along with it, it's like I'll start laughing too. And I love offensive humor, like on a personal level. It's like my favorite kind of definitely my favorite kind of humor. Like I've got a dark humor, but
Of
I
course.
I tend to keep it shoved down, I guess. So yeah, but yeah, if other people are laughing and think that it's funny, then I'm like, haha, that's so funny. But if everybody else is not laughing, then I try to change the subject and get everybody off of that topic, I guess. Like if I'm in that situation.
Yeah, you know what? I did notice that people in the TIFE axis, even with the FE, there is like you guys like morbid humor kind of that I've noticed.
Yeah.
Like this I used to teach like a senior fitness class, and sometimes the seniors are doing something that's kind of morbid. Like one time like do you know an exercise called like a tricep press down? Have you ever heard of it?
I've heard of it. I don't think that I've done it for a long time. I might have done it once in high school, but yeah, it's not coming straight to my memory right now.
Okay, well, no worries. So, anyways, with like the senior classes, we use bands and they do like a tricep workout to strengthen their triceps. So if they fall, they can like extend their tricep and catch themselves so that they won't fall on their hip and stuff. Um,
Okay,
yeah. So we put the band like just behind their head and then they press down on it, right?
yeah.
But then like one time I was teaching this like seniors class, it was one senior took the band and she wrapped it around her neck, and then and every time she would do a tricep press down, she would start choking. She would like, and then like I noticed the other seniors were laughing and I didn't know why. And I look, and I'm like, oh my god, you need to stop doing that.
Yeah. Like I'm gonna get in trouble. Stop.
Yeah. Well, I didn't want her to kill herself, right? But then
Right.
I remember telling this like scenario to like another group class, like warning them not to do it. And I told them what happened. And then there's like some TIFE people in the class, and I saw them laughing, and I'm like, oh, I see. So you guys like the morbid, that kind of more. It's inappropriate, but it's kind of morbid, but it's kind of funny, you know.
Yeah, no, that's 100% my kind of humor. Like I'm the kind of person that'll be like, if I drop this one more time, I'm gonna go throw a toaster in my bath tonight, like stuff like that,
Yeah,
like just
I see.
really, really morbid stuff. And yeah, no, but that's more in like my own personal group or in like friend groups and stuff like that, or
Yeah,
people that are making those jokes too first.
yeah.
And then I'm like, okay, I'm safe to like say the kind of stuff that I think is funny. But if they don't go there, then I'm kind of like, I don't know if that's the good idea or not.
I see. So when you're like using your TI to make the joke, you play it by ear first. They have to you have to know them for a while first before you like go the offensive TI humor as opposed to like, the more like friendly FE humor.
Yes. Yeah. And then I play games too, like online, and I noticed that a lot of people that are on those games, like it's kind of a free for all. Like you can just go on there and say whatever.
Yeah.
And that's another one of those places where I'll just go on there and like just throw my humor out to the world and say really
Yeah.
messed up stuff. But it's because I know that other people are doing it on there. So I guess it's kind of the same concept anyways. So yeah.
I see. That makes sense.
Yeah.
I guess you're just following the vibe. So if that's the vibe, then
Yeah, pretty
that's
much.
what it is. Um, that's cool. Let's go back to your NF again. So NF is also correlated with meaning and purpose. So like with your job right now, you're helping like autistic kids, you said. Uh,
Yes. Yeah.
do you feel like a sense of meaning and purpose, like working with them and making their life better? Like, is that something that like gives you like that energy of like, I feel good about myself. I feel good that like I'm making the world a better place.
Yes. Yeah, I do. I'm actually leaving the field at the end of the month after being in it for 3 years, and it's just one of those things where it was like I was kind of ignoring my own personal exhaustion and everything to do with it. It's really hard to do. It's very hard on the mind. It's definitely something that you have to do a lot of research on before you get into it, which I didn't do because of that consume last. I was like, hey, this is a foot in the field, got right in, and then I didn't know what I was signing up for at the time. But yes, I do have a lot of meaning and purpose. I love the kids that I work with, and they're, it definitely gave me a whole different perspective on children and autism and autistic children. But yeah, they're wonderful. I love, like, I don't know, I love knowing that I'm helping them to be better versions of themselves. And there is a lot of meaning behind it. Yeah, because it's like I'm always thinking, oh, they're gonna be so much better in the future because of some of the stuff that I'm doing, and just it makes me feel like I'm making the world a little bit of a better place, I guess.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think a lot
Yeah.
of them are misunderstood and they're like higher functioning that they really seem. Um,
Yeah, that's definitely the truth from what I've seen. Yeah, a lot of kids, like I've even seen kids that are nonverbal, and I'll put a question, like a picture in front of them that'll be like, choose the right one. And I can always tell because they sit there and they think about it for a minute before choosing the right one. And they'll look at me if they don't know. So there's always some sort of communication there, whether it's body language, verbal language sometimes. It really depends on the kid and the family and everything like that. And yeah, it's very interesting. They're usually extremely smart. Like most of the kids that I've worked with are really smart. Yeah.
yeah, aren't they like some of them are like genius level? It's just like they're just really good at one thing and then the other thing they have trouble with. So it's like
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It's I've noticed that some kids are very just from personal experience, I can't speak for all of them, but from personal experience, a lot of kids are really, really smart with certain things like languages or math or science or like something really usually very conceptual and weird, and just takes a lot of like brain space and information and consuming, I guess. And they're very good at those kind of subjects, but it's like with basic life skills like brushing their teeth or writing with a pencil properly, like stuff like that is stuff that they really struggle with. It's very interesting.
All right. I want to ask you next now about your sleep. Your
Yeah.
sleep is double masculine SITI sleep. There's a
Yeah.
lot of parts to unpack with ST sleep, so I want to go over the different aspects of it and ask you about it. Okay, just from your personal experience.
Okay.
The first part is the ST part, which is tied to competence. Would you say you tie your identity to being competent? And if someone were to say you're incompetent, that you would get really offended or hurt. But like you try your best to be like good at what you do.
Yes. I am definitely one of those people where if I feel like I'm not doing good enough in a field, I'll either give up and go somewhere else, or I get really offended when I feel like that I'm doing my best and nobody else agrees with me. And it's one of those very like I see it as selfish. I know that's not really selfish, but it's one of those things where it's like if I feel like I'm not doing good enough at something, or if I feel like the tribe doesn't see me as being competent in a particular subject, I have a really hard time with that and I beat myself up over it really hard. and I pretty much like I can't sleep, or it's one of those things. It's kind of weird because it has the opposite effect on me. I can't sleep because I overthink it so much. I'm really in my head about stuff like that. And it's like what I'm in my head about is usually related to like, what am I going to do with my career? What am I going to do with my life? Where am I going to travel? If I don't do all of this by this age, then I'm not living my life, and like all this stuff. It's like I have very high expectations for myself. Yeah. And that's really hard. And I do get upset and offended when people don't see the effort that I'm putting in.
It's weird because sometimes people won't see the effort because it's sleep. So you're doing it in private. So it's gonna be hard for people to see like you in action when you did put a lot of work in that field that you're working on. So how can you? But it's also weird because then some people could also offend you during your work, right? Maybe you're not finished the whole process yet, and then
Right.
some TE jerk comes in like say, hey, how about this? How about this? And you're like, well, let me finish first, and then let me show you. So like so what's the balance there between like showing people your competence, your work, and then but then feeling vulnerable also that they can see like the work versus like um like just hiding it and then just showing the finished product. um
Yeah, it's like it's one of those things. Hold on, my dog has a squeaky toy. I'm gonna take it away from her for a minute.
no worries.
No. But anyways, it's one of those things where it's like whenever I'm showing people something that I'm into or something that I'm interested in or something that I've worked on myself, and I do get like what you were saying, I get very nervous that they're not going to accept it, and that they're going to be like, I don't know, I get nervous that they're going to think that it's weird, or that it's not worth looking into or reading, or that I did something wrong with it, or that I was wrong about some piece of information. And I'll spend hours, days, months, years on like these subjects and always think, are people gonna like it? Is this weird? Like it's always like stuff like that. And yeah, I definitely feel kind of discouraged sometimes when people don't show the same amount of interest that I put in something. But I also know realistically, like not everybody's going to be interested in the same thing that I am. So
Right.
I try to break it down for people to understand like a bullet point kind of basis, I guess, if that makes sense. I guess that's my blast that I'm doing that with. But yeah.
I think the stuff that you said kind of make it. It's like what David Chan said, that people with NE tend to be better at explaining things because they're responsible for making other people understand. So even if you have NE at the bottom, I think that just based on what you said, you're like, I'm gonna still try to put the bullet points so that they understand. So I think it's still kind of helpful in your case, like the people would get what the kind of work that you're doing because you're at least you're gonna try with the NE, right? If you don't have NE, you're not even gonna try.
Right.
Um, uh, with that being said, they type someone in the class. He's a I don't know if you heard of Mark Rober, but he's the ENTP that they type in the class. So
Yeah.
same same quadra as you, and also MF like you. So
Yeah.
um and then like because you guys have ST as your sleep, obviously the work is personal. But David Shan said that he's doing it right compared to like other people, the FETI people, because he actually asked the tribe first, is like, what do you guys want to see? And then after they tell him what he wants to see, then he builds it, right? He goes, hides in his corner and builds it. And in that way, it's not a surprise that like when he releases it, everyone likes it because he already asked them ahead of time, what do you guys want to see? So have you ever thought of
Yeah.
copying, like asking the tribe first, like, hey, what do you guys value, before you like get to work with something?
Honestly, I've never thought about doing that before, which is kind of silly considering that I have feminine FE. Like you would think that I would be kind of like that, but no, no, I have a really hard time with that. Actually, I'm like, I tend to get interested in things for myself, and then I'm always feeling like the tribe is interrupting me.
Oh, I see.
And then I'm like, oh my God, like I have to go help these people again and like all this stuff. So I'm really like kind of angry about helping people sometimes because
Yeah,
I'm like, I want to focus on my thing, but then I know that I'm doing the right thing. And it's like, I'm not angry at the person. I'm just angry at the circumstances, if that
yeah,
makes sense. It's like, they can't help it that they need help, but like, I don't want to put my time aside, but I have to, it's like one of those like moral obligation kind of things, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm definitely more like like information for me. And so I never thought about doing that before. So I think I'm going to try that and see if it works out actually.
Yeah, I mean, like, it seems to, I mean, he's the same quadra as you, so it's gonna work
Yeah.
for sure. And everyone loves him, the FE, love, like, because he's like, he asked him first before he built it, right? So it's like,
Yeah.
he didn't like built it first and hope there's like a party after, he asked
Yeah.
people, yeah, so there's like a confirmation already that people wanted this. So that's why David Chan said this guy's doing it right. This FETI guy is doing it right.
Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna have to look into that because I never even thought about that before until just now. But when you put it into words, I'm like, that makes perfect sense. Like,
Yeah,
I don't know
exactly.
why I haven't thought of that, but it's like you're blind to information that's like obvious to you, I guess, sometimes. So
Yeah.
kind of silly.
Um, let's talk about the other parts of ST sleep now. The other part is like frugality. So I notice a lot of people with ST sleep, they tend to be on the frugal side, and they tend to be like more like not everyone, of course, but like it depends on the person. Like I've seen some people with the ST sleep, like once they make a certain amount, then they become more generous. But like they have to get to that point first, And that level is different for everyone. And there's like the extreme one where they're like really like super frugal, right? Where are you in that scale of frugality, like with that the ST sleep?
You see, I'm one of those people where I like to give money and give things to people and help people and go out of my way and drive places and go on vacations and stuff when I have the extra money. But like you said, like, yeah, if I don't have the extra money, I'm kind of like avoiding giving my money to anybody. Like I'll avoid grocery shopping for as long as I possibly can
Yeah.
because I'm like, oh, I don't want to spend my money. But then I'm a victim to like the little microtransactions on games and stuff like that.
Right.
Because in my brain, I'm like, oh, it's only $2. But then I do that like 20 times. And then it's like, oh, I shouldn't have done that.
Right. I
Yeah. So, long-term consequences, I'm like not thinking of that. But that's really one of the only things that I have a hard time with money. But otherwise, no, I am pretty like I'm usually looking at my bank account like every single day to see exactly how much I have in there. And I'm always writing down how much my bills are going to be every month so that I know how much to save and
right.
everything like that. So I'm really big on like monetary value kind of stuff. So money has always been like a really big thing for me.
Yeah, I noticed with people with SITI, you guys are good at like figuring out like what's the best way to save money, especially with like the TI to analyze it, and then the SI is like tracking the sensory. So
Yeah.
it definitely could be a superpower for sure. Um, so I don't see it as a bad thing. I think it's only bad if you're like I say, if you have like some extra and you don't enjoy life with it, because like I think some of the savior ST people, especially like if they have it first, they could go crazy with that. If left unchecked. I mean, obviously, it's a minority. It's not all like people with SD sleep that do this, right? Obviously, so most are pretty
Right.
like most of them can see like the tribe be like, hey, you know what? I'm going crazy here. Let's be more balanced, right? So, all right,
Yeah, yeah. Like I'm definitely the type of person where, and I hate it because I do it myself, and then sometimes I'll look at like what other people in my life are doing, and I'm like, you shouldn't buy that. You shouldn't do this. Like you shouldn't. Don't do that. Like be smart. And then I feel like I'm trying to help and give advice, but it comes off as being very like controlling
yeah.
and like naggy almost. Like I feel like I'm nagging people and I'm like, ew, I hate that. My dad is the same exact way as me in that way. Like I'm pretty sure he and I are both SITI masculine. And it's like, yeah, I always hated it growing up, and then I grew up being like that. And then I'm like, oh man, like now I know how these guys feel. I feel bad.
Well, at least you're double deciding. You can see like you doing the same thing. It's like what your parents are doing. Maybe you're cringing a little bit at yourself at that thought of like
Yeah.
thing. Um, I do see SF Blast being like one of the more naggy animals, because
Yeah.
yeah, and it's like I think it's coming from a good place. You just want to make sure people are like doing well. But it doesn't always translate well, if you're in the receiving end of it. So I could
Right. Right.
yeah.
Yeah. It always comes out as being very like, do this, do this, do this. You have to do this. Like, you have to do it. And I'm like, I'm not trying to like boss people around. I'm trying to help them like see the bigger picture, I guess. Like,
Yeah.
hey, this is what's going on. These are the steps that you have to take to get there. But it's like explaining that in the proper way is very difficult sometimes.
So we covered the specifics of the ST sleep. I want to cover the more like general side of it, which is kind of something that all the sleep animals share. So how are you when it comes to setting boundaries with other people? Especially
Horrible.
with your double masculine ST sleep. So when it comes out, is it super aggressive? Like when you finally set the boundaries, is it like pretty aggressive?
Yeah, it takes me a really long time to set boundaries. I had a situation kind of like this recently, actually, where I was like, I was in a situation where people were kind of like taking advantage of my time. I felt like they were taking advantage of my time, and I was always giving to them and always trying to help and always trying to do things and to be there and to do extra time on things and stuff to help out. But it was like when I started feeling like they were only noticing every little thing that I did wrong and not noticing anything that I did right. And it was getting to the point, like it always gets to the point where I start shaking whenever I talk to that person that's involved in that situation, like where I'm having a hard time setting boundaries with them. So I'll start like kind of having anxiety and stuff when I talk to them. And it takes me getting to that point and like getting emotional and crying and being like, why do they hate me? And like all this like dumb stuff. But then once I get to the point where I get angry enough to set a boundary, it's like I ghost them. I just set a hard boundary. I refuse to be friends with them. I refuse to talk to them. I'm very like straightforward and monotone with talking to them. I'm not friendly. I'm not like, I wouldn't say that I'm rude. I try to be cordial to everybody, whether I like them or not, because the truth is like, you know, I don't have to like everybody and not everybody has to like me. And I'm okay with that. But it's like for me, setting those boundaries with people that I grow to dislike, it's very difficult. And I have a really hard time keeping my head on straight once I'm going through the process of setting that boundary. Because it would be easier for me to just be like, hey, I'm done. Goodbye. Like just block them, never speak to them again, get them out of my head and just move on with my life. But unfortunately, it's not that easy most of the time. And so I have to like kind of keep my temper at bay and keep myself sane by doing other activities or being around other people that are of high value to me. And that's pretty much how I keep it together. But yes, I am very aggressive about setting boundaries once I get to that point sometimes.
Yeah, I relate to a lot of the stuff that you said because I also have double masculine sleep. So when you said that you're like, you're aggressive, you're not even friendly anymore when you're setting boundaries, I
Yeah.
totally related to a lot of that stuff. And also when you said it takes a long time to get there, when you could have nipped it in the bud early on, I can relate to that as well, having it in a demon state. So definitely,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. Now with that being said though, you're energy dominant, so you have sleep thirds, it's not last, right? So
Yeah.
you're still doing it in some sense. So when it comes time for you to rest and recover, do you get really aggressive? People try to like disturb you when it's like rest time for you, you know, especially when you start
Yes,
waking up in
in
the
a
morning.
way. Yeah, so it's usually in the morning. It's kind of weird. I usually wake up in the morning and I have to lay there for about 5 to 10 minutes and then I'm up and ready to go. And
Yeah.
I don't know if that's that high play. Like I'm just like super ready to go. But once it's usually when I get to the end of the day and I kind of start to crash, like I notice when I'm going to crash. So I'll stop and I set time for myself for whatever I feel like doing with that time, whether it's talking to friends, just watching a movie by myself, taking my dog for a walk. And then if a bunch of people start texting me after work and they're like, you want to hang out? You want to do this? You want to talk? It's like, not with everybody, but with people that I'm not like super close to, I'm just like, no, I'm busy. I'm doing this. I'm like, I'll like lie and say, I'm going out. I'm doing this. Like, sorry, I can't get online. I can't talk on the phone right now. And it's like stuff like that. I try to be as honest with people as possible. And just, I've gotten to a point where I say, like, dude, I'm just not in the mood right now. Like, I just need some space. But when they're like, come on, just talk, just call me, just let's go out. I'm like, no, like, sorry, I can't.
Yeah, you're definitely super double decided though. Like even when you're getting aggressive, you can't help but see the other person's perspective. So it's
Yeah.
it's definitely a good balance. So it's not a bad thing per se. Um, let's cover the last part, the last animal here. Anti-consume. This is gonna be like the part that will like be the most troublesome for you. Um, let's go over the first part. So anti-consume is consuming information for self, especially if you're looking for a solution. So you're using consume to find solutions instead of just blasting even more. Um, you know,
Yep.
when does it come out? When you finally, or when you finally say, you know what, I need to research to find a solution for my problem. I can't just keep trying this thing. It's not working.
Yeah, it's usually it takes me a minute to get there, but it's kind of silly because it usually kind of comes out when other people are having problems. So it's like, for example, like I have a friend that's like, "Hey, my car just broke down on the side of the road. Can you help me figure out what to do to fix it?" or something like that. Like, "Can you look up what's going on?" It's like I will ask them, like, what sound is it making? Is there a smell, or is there this, or what is it doing? Or I'll go over there in person and look at it and see what's going on with it. And then I'll start searching everything that I possibly can on Google and looking at every article that I can find and just going like deep dive into it and trying to kind of figure out what's going on. And I'll do that with other people or for myself. Like if my car will break down, I'll like sit there and try to figure out what's going on before I bring it to the shop, because I'm like, I want to have an idea first so I know that they're not ripping me off.
Right, right. That makes sense.
So, yeah, it's like stuff like that. But like even just if it's like I have hypochondria too. So I feel like this is kind of a good example. Like if I feel like I'm having symptoms of something, I'll like over consume all of the information on what it could possibly be. And I
Right.
get scared and I'm like, ah, it's just like, yeah, like any tidal wave overload kind of thing is usually when it comes out. Yeah.
Yeah, I did notice that with ISFJs is that like a lot of you guys, when you feel like you're feeling sick and stuff, even a little bit, you go paranoid already and you find a way to um find the reason why it's what's happening, trying to understand what's going on. And yeah, I did notice it seems to be like an ISFJ thing, or people with SI in general, like that paranoia with like your health. I think
Yep.
people with extrovert sensing tend to be like more neglectful unless they're high sleep, of course, when it comes to like this kind of stuff. While like people with SI tend to be a little bit more paranoid when it comes to this stuff. So that's kind of interesting that you said that, because I'm like, oh, okay, you're not the first person that said this. um,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, so part of NT consume is also your external self-awareness. And it's kind of like also your external image. So do you try to put on like an external image to the public? I mean, you have it in a demon state, but like, do you try to put on an image that you're like super smart, or like not really super smart, but like you're smart? Do you try to put that image onto people, like come across?
Yes. Yeah, and that's one of the reasons that I always thought that I was NT for a long time, is because I'm very nerdy with certain things and I just appear to be a very nerdy person usually. Like I'm kind of done up right now compared to usual, but usually I have my hair up and I'm wearing glasses and I'm wearing like a school t-shirt or something like that, like something dumb. And I'm just like I don't, it's like one of those things where I'm almost so in my own head that I don't really care about what everybody else sees. But yes, I think just on like an average basis I do appear very nerdy, and when I talk to people they're like, a lot of the stuff that you talk about is like weird stuff that goes over my head, like even OPS and Myers-Briggs originally was like all this weird concept, it's a lot of conceptual stuff, a lot of Jung studies are very any, and so it was always something I really gravitated towards. And it was like I look like a bum when I go out, and then I'm just spouting nonsense about all this stuff that I can't even explain in a sensory way to most people that I know. And I'm like, oh my God.
When you also consume, let's say, entertainment, do you like to consume like sci-fi, or something that's more fantasy based as opposed to something that's reality because of the NE and the TI?
Fantasy, yes. I'm big on Lord of the Rings and all that kind of stuff. Like I'm really big on The Witcher, Lord of the Rings, and I read the books. I was like really into it for a long time. I like to look into the lore of everything.
Yeah.
Even when I play games, I play World of Warcraft, so I go on there and I look up all the lore behind all the different
Yeah.
characters and stuff because it's just fun. I just enjoy it. But yes, I definitely consume a lot of like fantasy and sci-fi, I guess. I do tend to gravitate towards science fiction novels and movies and everything like that. But yeah, I like all those subjects a lot. Those are definitely my favorite when it comes to like television and everything. But usually when I'm consuming, it's with music. And I'm always listening for like weird things in music. Like I'm listening for like just the drum, and then I'll replay the song, and I'll listen for just the guitar, and then so on and so forth. And yeah, it's like I'm picking it apart in my head. So
I guess that's your audio kicking in there. Your audio sexual modality. You're like,
yeah,
you have a sensitive ear, so you also have appreciation for this stuff. So, so that's cool.
yeah,
Yeah, you have any at the bottom. So, and you're an IJ. So, what kind of tidal waves are you experiencing with any at the bottom? Like, what kind of like, what tidal waves are, and what kind of paranoia do you experience because of that any at the bottom? You know, like what possibilities? Because it's all about possibilities, right? Like, what possibilities of
it's always
are you scared of?
like this weird stuff. Like if there's if I hear thunder outside, even if it's like really low and I'm in the shower, or if I see the lights flickering, I'm like, it's Armageddon. And it's like always the most ridiculous stuff. Like, oh, there's ghosts in my house, or like something silly. I don't know. Like it's always like, oh, there's a meteor that's gonna land on my head out of nowhere, or like I don't know. It's always kind of silly. It's usually related to health stuff. Whenever I get super paranoid, it's like usually like I'm gonna die, but I'm not gonna die. I just have a freaking chest cold, you know. So it's like, yeah, it's always kind of like an extreme version of what could happen. Like it's always going to the worst possible scenario of what is happening, and it's like whether it's realistic or it's not, it's always like it's just always I'm always seeing things in a very extreme kind of way that is like, okay, if I sit down and I relax for a minute and I think about it, I'm like, that makes no sense. Like that is not actually happening. But when I have a bad any tidal wave, like I'm usually going around telling everybody like there's something wrong with me, or there's something wrong with this, and I kind of act a little bit like hyped up, I guess.
Would you say you could be superstitious then as a result of having that any at the bottom? Like
A little bit,
a little
yeah. And I grew up with a family from the South, so it was always like all those Southern superstitions. So like, oh, it's bad luck if you see a black cat crossing the
yeah,
road,
right.
or Friday the 13th is a bad day, or something like that. Like, I try to combat those things by just actively like ignoring it and trying to think other thoughts like that are opposite of it if it gets too invasive. But most of the time I can think of it as, huh, that's a superstition from my family like forever ago, you know. But yes, I am definitely a very superstitious person. Like I broke a window a few years, or not a window. I broke a mirror in my house a few years ago, and it was always like, if you break a mirror, then you'll have 7 years of bad luck. And I was convinced up until the 7 year mark, my luck is terrible because I broke that mirror. It's like always
Jeez.
something kind of silly like that.
That's crazy for sure.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Um, I had a question for you, but it flew out of my head. I hate having SI at the bottom. I always forget things. Oh yeah, I remember now. So invasive thoughts. I want to ask you about invasive thoughts. So David Shannon showed a video of like ISTJs and ISFJs having invasive thoughts. I don't know if you saw that one. It's so crazy. And also funny because like um the way they describe it is like those ENFPs and ENTPs, they're just like verbalizing all those invasive thoughts all the time. That's why they sound so crazy all the time.
Yeah,
But like the ISFJs and ISTJs, they have it also. They're just suppressing it, but they have it all the time. And then they showed like a video of like this girl who's looking at ducks, right? He's like, what if I drown those ducks? I think that's a context or something. You know, it's like, no, why would I drown them? They're so cute, you know? Or it's like something like that, right? There's some kind of like messed up thought that pops up in your head. And then like you're like, why am I thinking about this? This is messed up, you know? Do you see them popping in your head all the time in like the most random situation where like you're thinking of something like really dark? You're like, what? Why am I thinking about this? You know, like
yeah. So we live in a mountainous region, and every time I go around this certain corner on a mountain, I'm always thinking, just drive straight, drive off the ledge. And I'm like, no. It's always like weird
oh my
stuff like
god,
that. Yeah. So that's pretty funny that you mentioned that, because another one that I have when I'm driving is I like I don't know. I don't know if I can explain it in a way that you can visualize it, but it's like I always think about driving on the right side of the road and driving with the right side of my car on the sidewalk and the other side of my car on the road and just driving like that. And I'm like, why? Why is this in my head? And it's always like the weirdest stuff that just I can't make any sense of it. I've never seen it before. I've never heard of somebody doing that before. It's just always like in my head. And I ever since I thought about it like 4 or 5 years ago, I just can't get it out of my head. It's like always there when I'm driving.
I just feel like that's like an opportunity for like an outlet for creativity, you know, like you can draw like a car driving on the sidewalk and the road at the same time, or like a cartoon,
Yeah.
or like a car like this like going off the cliff, you know. I feel like that's an opportunity for creativity. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's like, whoa, this is like really messed up. Maybe I should like, you know, do something with this, you know,
Yeah.
like a cartoon drawing or something, or you know,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I
Or
used to
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I used to actually just because you've mentioned the art, I did actually when I was younger, I used to doodle like weird things that I was thinking, and
Yeah,
it was kind of a good outlet for me whenever I had like weird thoughts in my head. I would be like, "Oh, I'm going to make an art piece out of this," or I'll write about it like in a story. Like I'll write a fiction type of thing about it with words, you know. That's usually what I would do is I would get these really weird thoughts in my head and I'd be like, how can I incorporate this? And I would write about it and then I would trash it after I wrote about it and it was out of my head.
yeah. I think it would also be a good like conversational piece also if you brought it up, because it's so funny and entertaining when you have like those kind of thoughts and you verbalize it, you know. So I don't, yeah, I think it's a good thing if anything, you know, because like everyone has like light and dark, and if you just talk about like the messed up, like some of like, you know, like the stuff that you were saying earlier that was super funny, like drive off the cliff, you know, like that's kind of funny, you know, like in a messed up way,
Yeah.
you know. So yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I do sometimes is I bring it up in conversations and people are always like, "What?"
Yeah. Um, well, you know, you're like ENTP and ENFP cousins are doing it already, so might as well, right? Um,
Yeah.
let's talk about your kinesthetic now. Your audio kinesthetic. So you have the kinesthetic side of your sexual modality. So that's like doing things with like movement and stuff or exercise. Um, and part of your sleep is SITI. So putting it together, one of the things that one of the ENTPs I interviewed with Savior Sleep said is SITI sleep is having a body that works. So that's the exact word that he used, right? So basically, you have like an exercise routine or a health routine that you follow so that your body works, right? So that, you know,
Yeah.
your shoulder is not busted or whatever, or like you feel good the next day when you wake up. Like just having a routine for, you know, exercise, nutrition, sleeping, and mental health. So using your kinesthetic, what do you do to that to exercise so that your body is working at its best, or do you not do that? You know.
See, I'm pretty bad about exercising. Like I don't have like a set routine of like doing pull-ups or doing push-ups or anything like that, but I like to when it's not blazing hot outside, I like to walk my dog around the block and I always take her for the same walk. And I like to hike too when it's cooler outside. So it's always stuff like that. Like I just like to be out in nature. So I'm kind of like enjoying the nature around me while also making my body feel better. But honestly, a lot of what I do is related to kind of like keeping my mental health in check because I tend to get very overwhelmed and anxious about things. So I'm always like, I'm always trying to take supplements or I'm always trying to go outside whenever I remember to do so and like just trying to keep my body active so I can keep my brain less active, if that makes sense. Like I'm trying to like take in information, whether that's playing music. And actually that's one thing that I do. I think for me, like not as much of an exercise routine, but a lot of like I play violin. I've been playing for like a super long time and I'm very like focused on that. It's very physical for me and I get to like watch my fingers and try to make them work and hold everything right and everything like that. So it's kind of a weird little hobby that I have that kind of just keeps my brain in check and kind of keeps my body in check and my ears and everything like that. It's just nice. It just helps. But yeah, it's I think driving is kind of a big thing for me. I drive a lot for work, so I think that's part of the reason I don't exercise as much as I want to. But if I can't exercise, then I'll go for a drive and go like look at the nature and stuff like that.
Do you enjoy driving?
I do to an extent, but I have a little bit of road rage, and I don't know what that is related to, but I think from driving every single day, like as much as I do, I drive like 2 hours a day. So I'm just like, oh my God, like driving on a busy highway just stresses me out and I get really annoyed. But when I'm driving back roads, like over by the mountains and stuff like that, like I really enjoy it. Yeah.
Do you like open your window, cuss people out during those road rage bouts?
No, 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 no. I'm too scared of that. Like I'm always thinking, what if they have a gun or something like that? Like
Right.
it's always
That's true.
something. Yeah, like what if they like get pissed off and do something? And yeah, it always just stresses me out. But no, I don't do that. Every once in a while I'll do this to people while I'm driving by them. I just give them a thumbs up, kind of as a sarcastic type of thing, but it isn't as aggressive as like flipping someone off or yelling at them. And I
Yeah.
only do like I only flip someone off every once in a while, like if it's really, really bad how they're like if they're driving just terribly.
Yeah.
But that's pretty rare. I don't do that like all the time.
Gotcha. Okay. Um, last thing I want to cover is your social type. So you're a two, so you are
Yeah.
responsibility and friends. Can you share a little bit about that? And some of the cross checks for twos is um what's the word I'm looking for here? Acts of service being your love language. And then if you're two, it's acts of service and then quality time. That's kind of like the deal. Do you see yourself having those love language as like acts of service? Like you like to receive service and you like to give service, and you also like to hang out with people, have quality time. Is that something that you see with yourself?
Yes, 100, yeah, 100%. And I I like to help people with things and I don't expect anything I always like I'll give people gifts or money or stuff like that and I'm like, "Nah, I don't you don't need to give it back. You know, you don't need to give me anything back." But I try to help people. I try to like get them on a better track. I try to help them fix things. I try to help them move. I always offer to help people do stuff, but then I feel very hurt if people don't want to help me with things. Like that's definitely something like if I ask somebody for help because I don't like asking for help and then I don't receive it, it like hurts my feelings. So yeah, I would definitely say that the acts of service is a very big thing for me. I like to have it reciprocated and I also like to give it, but I'm one of those people where it's like, even if it's not being reciprocated back to me, I'll still keep doing it because it's how I show that I care about people. And yeah, so I'll overdo it sometimes because of that. Like I'll exhaust myself because I'm trying to help people so much and everything. And then I'm just like, oh my God, I'm burnt out and I can't keep doing this, you know. And then quality time is also really big for me. I like to hang out with friends and I like to talk on the phone with people a lot. Like I'll call my mom every single day whenever I'm on my way to work. It's kind of like a part of my daily routine. I try to anyway. Sometimes I'll be really cranky and I'll just want to listen to music on the way home or on the way to work. But yeah, most of the time I'll try to call her and talk to her and or call my dad or whoever is available. I like to talk and kind of like play with the tribe, I guess. So
So part of being a two also is like having like either like entrepreneurial part of them, or either like having multiple projects and they just can't help but like do like multiple different stuff even if they're IJs. Do you see yourself doing that as well? Like you just can't help
yes.
yeah. Can you share some of the stuff that you know, like how that
Yeah.
affects you?
So I have a lot of different projects that I'm trying to do and I've started some of them and I haven't started others and I just have them as ideas that I want to do eventually. So like one of those things is I really want to write a book eventually. I want to write a fiction novel and I get a really good idea in my head and I blast it and I put all the plot points on a paper and I'm like, I'm ready. I'm going to do it. And then I something comes up in my life or I get bored or I think of something else and then I'm like, trash, trash. No, I'm not going to finish that. So I have all of these like rough drafts written for different stories on my Google Docs. That's like max 5 pages and I'm trying to finish them, but I have a hard time doing one thing at a time. But I'm also a horrible multitasker. So it's like, it's a curse. It's like, I can't get one thing at a time done because I get really bored if I'm trying to just focus on that one thing.
Right.
But then if I try to multitask, I get overwhelmed and I just drop all of it. So I just, yeah, it's one of those things. And music is another one of those things. I try to create music and try to like make all this stuff, and I'll start writing lyrics and then I'll stash it away for a while and then come back to it like a year later and try to finish it and like stuff like that. But yeah, it's really hard for me to finish a project. Even for school, I have a hard time with like college and stuff like that.
Yeah, especially your blast play, so that doesn't help either with that
Yeah.
like ADHD-ish. One last thing about being a 2 is negative feedback. So Dave and Shan said 1s and 2s feed off negative feedback, while 3s and 4s they prefer like the more positive feedback. So like they were talking about, like, I think their son or something, they have to give him positive feedback, otherwise he'll get demotivated to work at something. But like with the 1s and 2s, if you like challenge them, with like some kind of negative feedback, they're like, oh yeah, I'll show you, kind of deal. It's not always like an ego related thing, but sometimes it's just like somehow the negative feedback like puts a fire, like lights a fire up your butt, like how do you relate to that, where like you get a negative feedback, you're like, especially let's say for work, for you, like, oh yeah, you say I can't do this, I'll show you, and then you get like more motivated. But if there's like positive feedback, it's almost like you almost get like lose like motivation, like you almost need some negativity to like pump you up, at least a constructive criticism, at least,
Yeah. Constructive criticism is something that I've always liked to do with other people, and I've always liked to receive it. So I am one of those people where I would like to hear one thing that I'm doing or that could be better, and one thing that I'm doing right, so that I have the right idea of what I'm doing and what direction I need to go in. So I have a hard time when I'm just getting negative feedback and nothing else from people. Like, you're doing this wrong, and then I don't hear from them for a few days. You're doing this wrong, and then I don't hear from them again for a few days. And it's never anything positive, except for like once in a while, like, oh, you're doing great otherwise. And I'm like, it's just one of those things where I'm like, what point does that make? But yes, I definitely get an attitude where if people are telling me, oh, you suck at doing this, I'm like, I'll show you. I'm going to be great at it. I'm going to be better at it than you are. And I get really competitive with things in that way. And then that's the thing. That's one of those things that I stay super focused on, is I'll get so competitive about a subject that I will sit on it for years. And then once I finally get past that point, like I get better than that person at a certain skill, it's like I don't feel the need to call them and rub their face in it, like, haha, I'm better than you.
Yeah.
But it's like I'll bring it up in passing, like, yeah, I'm doing this now. Like, I'm doing this now. Like, I had a friend a few years ago, and I just think this is a kind of a good example. Had a friend a few years ago who was always like, oh, the field that you're going into is never going to make as much money as what I'm making. And she got her foot in the field. And so I got my foot in the field too. And I started making like way more money than her. And one day I was like, how much do you make? She told me, and then I told her what I was making, and it kind of made her mad. And I was like, it's kind of one of those things. Took 4 years to get there, but once I did, I was like, it just felt really good. But yeah, I don't want to be a jerk to people. I just want to, like, I want to prove that I can do things that people think that I'm not going to be able to do, pretty much. It's kind of one of those things.
I love that story. It's hilarious.
Yeah.
It's great. All right. So Bella, I've asked you all the questions for today. So we'll wrap up the interview here.
Okay.
So thanks for coming out and sharing more about yourself and your specific type. And your type is not very common in our group, so that's super cool that you're here to represent like the ISFJs, especially like the blast play, sleep consume. We don't have very, and also MF is something that we don't have very many either. Like most of the ISFJs we have are in the tester visual kind of realm. So that's kind of cool that you came out here and show like, yeah, this is what like the audio versions of us are like, so that's kind of cool.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I had a great time. I've watched your channel for a really long time, so this was really cool to hear from you. So I was very excited. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks. All right, well, enjoy the rest of your evening, and I'll see you around the Facebook groups and stuff.
All right, sounds good.